Chapter 146, The Broken Sword. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. With the mountain-toppling sword in hand, Chewobble Insu displayed no lack of vigor, as if turning into an inaccessible mountain. No flaw could be found on him. Zhang Yuochen felt the change in Chewobble Insu, and a will to fight rose in his heart. His blood started boiling. Finally, a true sword master. Zhang Yuochen said, "My name is Zhang Yuochen. What is yours?" Chewobble Insu. Chewobble Insu understood that Zhang Yuochen had agreed to compete with him. They stood only 5 steps apart, pressing their hands to their hilts and gearing up for the fight. Neither of them made the first move. They observed each other quietly, trying to find flaws. The young prodigies beside the battle stage all started to discuss amongst themselves. Prince Chewobble is the top master among the young generation in Longchuan Commandery. It is said that none of the young warriors in the whole Longchuan Commandery can block even one of his attacks. He really gives a face to that little daredevil from Yunwu Commandery by fighting him in person, said one teenage prodigy. But the daredevil is indeed powerful. He has defeated both Zhu Yi and Huo Ming. Otherwise, he would not be qualified to compete against Prince Chewobble. Did you hear what Prince Chewobble just said? He promised to defeat him with less than 10 moves. I think he can do it in 3. Chewobble Insu's sword techniques are extremely powerful. It's hard to block any of his moves. You are indeed a great master. You show no flaws at all. Very well. Then, I'll force you to show your flaws. All of a sudden, 2 dazzling lights burst out of Chewobble Insu's eyes. His bones and muscles moved quickly and made a loud crackling sound. Instead of using any fancy steps, Chewobble Insu simply strode towards Zhang Yuochen. It looked like he was in slow motion, but in just a second, he was right in front of Zhang Yuochen. 120 kilograms of mountain-toppling sword slashed towards Zhang Yuochen like a door. Chewobble Insu did not use genuine chi, but sparks of fire appeared on the sword edge, turning his weapon into a sword of flame. This was not a complicated movement, but Zhang Yuochen found it impossible to escape. Zhang Yuochen stood firmly and tried to use skill to overcome power. With a twitch of his arm, the flash-shining sword met the huge black sword like a dexterous snake, angling its power in another direction. The light in Chewobble Insu's eyes shifted. He laughed and said, "Good." Clash. Chewobble Insu's reaction speed was very fast. He immediately slashed again. He swung his sword with large movements, but each strike was controlled and precise. Boom. They clashed directly. Zhang Yuochen's arm went numb from the contact, and he fell backwards to the edge of the battle stage. Warriors were not allowed to use their genuine chi in the sword technique conference, because it was a contest of sword skill. But the warriors with a higher cultivation often had stronger physical power, and they were also faster than the warriors in other inferior realms. Naturally, they dominated the other warriors. Zhang Yuochen looked at his flash-shining sword and found a little crack on it. Chewobble Insu's mountain-toppling sword was a 7th-level genuine martial arm. The flash-shining sword, which was a 4th-level genuine martial arm, could not compete with it in either materials or sharpness. Chewobble Insu realized the unfairness. "I'll change my sword." "There's no need." With Shadow of the Royal Wind Dragon pace, Zhang Yuochen dashed to Chewobble Insu in no time. "Now, take this." It was so fast. Chewobble Insu was dazzled. Just then, a sword shadow came over his head. He felt the sword wind and a sense of stabbing pain on his head. Wham! Chewobble Insu leaned his head back, held his sword with both hands, and stabbed into the air. Zhang Yuochen twisted his body to avoid the sword tip. He landed behind Chewobble Insu and cried, "Sacred Guiding Sword." The flash-shining sword chopped down in a vertical line, directly towards Chewobble Insu's back. Chewobble Insu did not turn around. Instead, he stabbed back with his sword, like an iron shield blocking Zhang Yuochen's attack. Phew! The 2 swords clashed together. Sparks shot into the air. Army-breaking strike. Chewobble Insu suddenly turned around, planted his legs, and slashed horizontally. It was a movement in the mid-class of the spiritual stage. Chewobble Insu had refined it through dozens of campaigns and thousands of killings. One blow had enough power to sweep aside thousands of enemies. Now, because of their close proximity, the powerful attack forced Zhang Yuochen to block. This was why Chewobble Insu was a master. He knew that Zhang Yuochen's advantage was his speed, so he gave Zhang Yuochen no chance to escape, forcing Zhang Yuochen to face him directly. Slap! The two swords clashed with an ear-piercing crack. The flash-shining sword broke, and the tip spun away. The 1-meter sword had shrunk to a half-meter. But Zhang Yuochen did not panic. Instead, he stayed calm. He kicked against the ground and pushed himself backwards just in time to escape from Chuobalinsu's next strike. Good. Prince Chuoba is indeed the top master among the young generation in Longquan Commandery. He broke the daredevil sword in only 8 movements. How dare he call himself the greatest warrior in the world? To Prince Chuoba, he's barely worth battling. Chuobalinsu's eyes went cold. He cast a stern glance at the two men and said, he didn't lose. His sword broke only because it is of lower grade. Zhang Yuochen, I can lend you another sword to finish our battle. Zhang Yuochen shook his head and said, who told you I can't fight with a broken sword? Prince Chuoba, we are not done yet. I think I found the flaw in your swordplay. Your sword technique is very virile, but also very hard to link together. You don't have a complement after each movement. While it seems like your sword technique is unstoppable, when I counterattack in between your techniques, you will definitely lose. Chuobalinsu stayed calm and said, so, do you mean that you can defeat me within 2 sword strokes? Zhang Yuochen replied, pretty much. The 13th Commandery Princess pouted. That's a big boast for someone with a broken sword, she said. Chuobalinsu became more serious than ever before. He held his sword with both hands and cried, mountains and rivers breaking sword. Whoosh! The sparks of fear on the blade turned into a wave of fire aimed squarely at Zhang Yuochen. Zhang Yuochen leapt from the ground and stepped on Chuobalinsu's sword, pushing it towards the ground a little bit. At the same time, Zhang Yuochen threw his broken sword at Chuobalinsu. Boom! Chuobalinsu quickly redirected his slash to hit the broken sword away. As he brought up his sword to attack Zhang Yuochen, a strong wind blew from his side. Zhang Yuochen used the edge of his hand like a sword and struck Chuobalinsu's neck. Chuobalinsu fell to the ground with a heavy sound. Boom! Chuobalinsu's huge body collapsed on the ground. His neck would have been broken if Zhang Yuochen had not shown mercy. Zhang Yuochen appeared unruffled. He picked up his broken sword and said, a sword in the heart is more powerful than a sword in hand. You are so powerful. Chuobalinsu rubbed his neck. Although he still felt dazed, he managed to stand up. He handed his mountain-toppling sword to Zhang Yuochen and said, I lost. I'll keep my promise and give this sword to you. Zhang Yuochen smiled. He replied, a gentleman does not take what other people love. Although Chuobalinsu loved the mountain-toppling sword very much, he could not lose his honor. He insisted, if you don't take my sword today, everyone will see me as a cheater who goes back on his word. His personality was just as straightforward as his sword technique. Okay, I'll take it. After a moment's thought, Zhang Yuochen took the mountain-toppling sword. Then, he handed it back to Chuobalinsu and said, now, I give this sword to you. Chuobalinsu was astonished. He smiled and took the sword. Zhang Yuochen, thank you for your sword. I will send you another sword. I give you my word. Chuobalinsu walked around the battle stage. Many aristocratic daughters began throwing their golden jade leaves onto the battle stage from the 2nd floor of Jinfeng Court. There were over 10 golden jade leaves. Zhao Yanwu from Right Prime Minister's mansion. Sai Kongyena from General's mansion. Zhao Xuan from Grand Tutor's mansion. Seeing the golden jade leaves falling down like rain, other young genius went mad with jealousy. They should have let Zhang Yuochen go when he wanted to leave. Now, he has defeated 3 masters in a row, including Chuobalinsu. Many aristocratic daughters favored him. All he needed to do was pick up a golden jade leaf randomly, and he would have strong backer from now on. It was the chance of a lifetime. Damn it. He was pretty powerful. The 13th Commandery Princess was a little upset, feeling a sense of miscalculation. What if he really gets first place? Am I really going to have to marry him? Standing beside the 13th Commandery Princess, Liu Xin noticed her discontentment with Zhang Yuochen. He smiled and said, Your Highness, I can defeat him. I was just wondering if you have any other requests. For example, breaking his legs or eliminating his cultivation. Liu Xun was a student of Right Prime Minister. He had been ordered by Right Prime Minister to place first in the Sword Technique Conference and marry the 13th Commandery Princess. The 13th Commandery Princess glanced at Liu Xun, and said happily, "That's too much. All you need to do is greatly humiliate that asshole. I'll offer you ample reward. I will never let you down." Liu Xun stared at Zhang Yuqian on the battle stage and narrowed his eyes.